I was born by Golden River, and in the shadow of two great hills, 5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation which began the freeing of American Negro slaves. The valley was wreathed in grass and trees and crowned to the eastward by the huge bulk of East Mountain, with crag and cave and dark forests. Westward the hill was gentler, rolling up to the gorgeous sunsets and cloud-swept storms. The town of Great Barrington, which lay between these mountains in Berkshire County, western Massachusetts, had a broad main street lined with maples and elms with white picket fences before the homes. The climate was, to I thought, quite perfect. I had, as a child, almost no experience of segregation or color discrimination. My classmates were invariably white. I joined quite naturally all games, excursions, church festivals, recreations like coasting, swimming, hiking, and games. I was in and out of the homes of nearly all my mates, and ate and played with them. I was as a boy unconscious of color discrimination in any obvious and specific way. Outside of my school, my chief communication with the people of the town was through church. My own family on both sides had been Episcopalians, but because we lived near the Congregational Church, and because my mother had many acquaintances there, and because the minister, Scudder, was especially friendly, my mother early joined the church. I think we were the only colored communicants. But I grew up in this church and its Sunday school, and it was there that one of the lady members, looking down on a chubby little brown child walking beside my mother, saw me take off my hat. My rather stiff, long curls were revealed, and with considerate kindness she said sweetly, "Little girls keep their hats on in church." This of course precipitated at home a wild fight on my part to have my curls cut off, and of course in time, and to my mother's grief, off they came. In general thought and conduct I became quite thoroughly New England. It was not good form in Great Barrington to express one's thoughts volubly, or to give way to excessive emotion. We were even sparing in our daily greetings. There was on the street only a curt good morning to those whom you knew well, and no greeting at all from others. In the summer of 1884, after my graduation from high school, there loomed the problem as to where I was going to go to college. Comparatively few of my white classmates planned or cared to plan for college, perhaps 2 or 3 in my class of 13. However, in my mind there was no doubt but that I was going to college, and in the fall of 1884, my mother died. There followed the half-guilty feeling that now I could begin life without forsaking my mother. This would be enough to support me at Fisk University, a college for Negroes in Nashville, Tennessee, which was said to do excellent work. Disappointed though I was at not being able to go immediately to Harvard, I regarded this merely as a temporary change of plan. I would of course go to Harvard in the end. But here and now was adventure. I was going into the South of slavery, rebellion, and black folk. Above all, I was going to meet colored people of my own age and education, of my own ambitions. I was thrilled to be for the first time among so many people of my own color, or rather, of such various and extraordinary colors, which I had only glimpsed before, but who it seemed were bound to me by new and exciting and eternal ties. Never before had I seen young men so self-assured, and who gave themselves such airs, and colored men at that. And above all, for the first time I saw beautiful girls. At my home, among my white schoolmates, there were a few pretty girls, but either they were not entrancing, or because I had known them all my life, I did not notice them. But at Fisk, the never-to-be-forgotten marvel of that first supper came with me opposite 2 of the most beautiful beings God ever revealed to the eyes of 17. I promptly lost my appetite, but I was deliriously happy. So I came to a region where the world was split into white and black halves, and where the darker half was held back by race prejudice and legal bonds, as well as by deep ignorance and dire poverty. Into this world I leapt with enthusiasm. A new loyalty and allegiance replaced my Americanism. Henceforward, I was a Negro. It was a piece of unusual luck, much more than my own determination, that admitted me to Harvard. There had been arising in Harvard at that time a feeling that the institution was becoming too ingrown, too satisfied with a sense of its own New England sufficiency. A determined effort was made in 1884 and later to make Harvard a more national institution, with good students from the South and West. I saw advertisements of scholarships which were to be offered, and I made application. In my favor were my New England elementary education, and the fact that I was studying in the South and I was colored. There had been hitherto very few colored students at Harvard.
That year, I was at a party and somebody called my attention to what Rutherford B. Hayes, ex-president of the United States, had been saying down at Johns Hopkins. Well, Rutherford Hayes at that time was head of the Slater Fund, which was money left by a Connecticut millionaire to educate Negroes. So I wrote Mr. Hayes and told him that I could get some professors to tell him that I was doing pretty good work there and that I should like to go and study in Germany. And I got everybody from the president of Harvard down. And he was simply overwhelmed with recommendations, and so I got a fellowship. I went to Berlin and stayed 2 years. To Germany, and there, of course, I had a tremendous new experience. For the first time in my life, I was just a human being and not a particular kind of human being. It was a new experience, of course, to me, and a very inspiring one. I came back from Berlin in 1892, and then there was the question as to where and what I was going to work in the United States. There wasn't, of course, the slightest chance of my getting any position in a white university, in spite of the fact that I had had better education than most white students had had. First, I tried to see if I could get in a colored school, either a college or even public school. One public school down in Tennessee considered me for a while, but thought I had rather too much education for them. Then I got an offer from Wilberforce. I accepted immediately, $800 a year. There I stayed 2 years, rather difficult years. The institution, of course, was of rather low grade, but with a great deal of devotion and enthusiasm. And I had ideas of turning it into a great German institution of learning. I ran against the religious difficulties. And so I walk with my cane and gloves into a prayer meeting and sit down at the back, and then the student who was carrying on the prayer meeting says, "We will be led in prayer by Professor Du Bois." And I said, "No, you won't." And I came near losing my job there. Well, that made initial difficulties, and I knew that in the end they would get rid of me because I wasn't orthodox enough. Still, I had a nice 2 years there, and I had some very good students, and we did some extra good work. The only difficulty was I was teaching Latin and Greek when my specialty was sociology, and they didn't have any sociology, and they didn't want me to teach it. Then I got my chance. I was asked to come to the University of Pennsylvania to make a study of the Negro population of the 7th Ward of Philadelphia.